So as promised, in a little bit, we are going to get into about a 90-minute long DJ mix with our guest this episode. That's Garrett David, but he has been nice enough to sit down with me for an interview. So we're going to get into that right now. First off, Garrett, thank you so much for the mix, and thank you for sitting down.
Yeah, thank you for having me be involved.
Of course, man. Of course. I've been trying to get you to do an episode for a long time. I don't know if you've ever listened to the show, but I probably play some track of yours or some remix almost every other episode. So
thank you.
It's good to finally get you on. What I like to do with these interviews is kind of first dig into the background. I call it your origin story. So kind of go way back to the beginning, and then we'll kind of bring it to the present, and then we'll play the mix.
Cool.
So starting with that, I mean, I can't go any further back than where were you born? Where are you from?
I'm originally from Columbus, Ohio. And grew up, well, actually not even Columbus, I guess. A smaller little village called Pataskala. It's like super tiny, just surrounded by cornfields.
Okay, cool.
And then in high school, I moved closer to the city, and that's sort of when I started getting more into dance music, I guess.
Okay. And then when, I feel like I've known you for a long time, but when did you move to Chicago?
The week I graduated high school.
Okay, wow.
Chicago, yeah.
Okay. And how long ago was that, if you don't, like, was that
2009, so about 9 years?
9 years ago.
Yeah.
And I feel like we've known each other for at least like 6 or 7 years,
yeah,
right?
Definitely.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah.
Cool. So, all right, so now we've got your true origin story, but then how did you get into kind of this music that you're into now? Whether it's not just the music that you make, but like the type of dance music, the melodic, rhythmic, electronic, whatever music. How did you get into all of that? What is the progression there?
Well, I think like the first sort of electronic music that really influenced me like came from video games. Like when I was little, I would like with specific games like go to certain rooms where like a song would play, and I just like let it play in my room and just like listen to these songs over and over. But then it kind of had like my angsty phase where I was like real into like punk and hardcore and stuff. But I feel like that energy sort of translated to later on when I started finding, like getting back into the electronic sounds and stuff like this. But I don't really know the exact moment. I think at the time when I first started getting into dance music, it was like, I guess you would call like the Bloghouse era, like 2006, 2007, where it was like a lot of like French guys doing stuff, specifically like this label called Instatubes I was really into. But basically, I was playing a party in my hometown. I was doing a party when I was like senior in high school, and I was playing this track by this guy named Sirkin, and then a buddy of mine came up. His name's Ed Luna, who kind of was in the Elemental crew in Columbus, which was like Todd Sines, Archetype, Titanton, like kind of, big Midwest guys, I guess, and specifically from Columbus. But he came up and he was like, oh, like this sample is Big Fun. And I'm like, well, what the hell is Big Fun? I never heard this. He's like, Inner City, like go listen to it, whatever, when you get home. And when I heard this for the first time, I was like, holy shit, like everything I've been listening to was like scraping at this, but like this is what I've been looking for. I just like didn't know it. And then it was like, then my whole world sort of opened up, and I started sort of attributing music to like physical places like the cities or the clubs or whatever that sort of embodied these different sounds. And that's sort of how I started to like discover things. It was like, okay, what is like Detroit, and like what is Chicago, New York, like these sort of things, and the labels that sort of gave them their name and stuff like this.
That's really interesting. I know, and we're going to get to it in a second, but you have kind of deep roots right now, and your practice, your work is very much concentrated in having music on vinyl, on records. Was that the case at the beginning, or at the beginning was it just kind of figuring out the music and then vinyl came later?
I think at the beginning it was definitely like I was finding everything online and like through MySpace and like anything like early YouTube stuff, like it was still, there wasn't much stuff uploaded. And then all the local record stores by me, like they would stock dance music, but it was more like indie sort of stuff, like DFA and stuff like this. So I never really kind of appreciated that experience until I moved to Chicago and was surrounded by so much music. And then it was almost like, for me, the records was like the easiest way to like discover and find things, and to find things that I liked, because like with the computer, it's like there's so many options that like it's almost overwhelming.
Yeah.
And in a record store, you can like talk to people, and people put you on, and then you start to sort of make this story in your own head and put these connections together. And reading the liner notes, like, oh, this guy did this label and I like that stuff, so I'll check this one out. And it just kind of snowballed from there.
That's why I love doing these interviews as well, because the first thing that you said that really resonated with me, you started to put physical places to the sounds that you were listening to. So I can kind of see that, then kind of the continuation of that being physical objects. These records actually had like writing on them and producer names and all this rich amount of information that you just don't get from a file, no matter how great it sounds.
Or like a YouTube link is like the song can be cool, but you don't like sort of retain that information when you're sitting in your hand, you're holding it, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's funny, like Eris and I, like, we always felt really nerdy because we would put on there like what sampler we used and what drum machine and whatever, but then we're like, somebody's like nerdy like us and wants to know that.
I love that shit, because like for me, I was like reading stuff like that. I was like, okay, now I need like a DX7 or whatever. It's like,
exactly.
You know what I mean?
No, that's amazing. That's amazing. Okay, so we have a pretty good kind of chronology right now. So you graduate high school, you've been doing music now, you've kind of brushed up with these crews, you've got your kind of music knowledge building. You moved to Chicago. So walk us through that. I know you worked at Gramophone for a while, but what was coming to Chicago like, and what changes occurred there that you would maybe want to mention?
Well, basically, I kind of fucked off all through high school and like did a terrible job. Like I was just like, would take my computer to school and like pretend to do work, but was like learning Ableton and stuff in all my classes. So when it came to like finding a college, there was really no options for me based off my performance. So like I knew that I wanted to pursue, you know, house and wanted to contribute something, but you still sort of have to appease your parents a little bit, I guess. So I use like Columbia, Chicago, which a lot of people have some success with this, but for me at the time, it seemed like a for-profit, like they'll just accept me, you know what I mean?
Right.
And that was more of like my excuse to come out here. And then once I got here, then I dropped out and just like pursued music full-time. But I guess, I mean, I had already started releasing stuff and started to sort of figure out that process, I guess, and was like... What were your
sorry to interrupt, but what were your first releases on?
So a lot of stuff was just like free downloads on SoundCloud and different like projects, like some really embarrassing aliases. I had like enough forethought to like not put my real name on it until like I really liked the music. But I guess like the first label. So basically, when I first moved to Chicago, I had known Maria, who's now the Black Madonna, from Louisville. Because when I was still in high school, I got booked to go play like Thunder on Derby or some weird thing during like the horse races there. And I met her and whatever, became friends. But then when I moved to Chicago, she had hit me up and was like, hey, I'm actually working, doing like data entry for this company called Soul Unlimited, I think.
Soul Unlimited, yeah.
Which was
Dust Tracks.
Yeah, Dust Tracks, owned by Radic or whatever. And it was like in this really shitty warehouse at like Damon and Carroll across the street from a dump. And like also next to the roasting house for Intelligentsia. So it was like no AC in the middle of the summer, like those smells. Like you never.
Was that like the
it.
garden floor thing? Like you'd walk downstairs?
There was like a shipping company in the bottom floor, and then the top floor was like Dust Tracks, where there was just like 250,000 records.
Yeah.
That like I think Radic had seized from other distributors that like went under, you know. But that was sort of my, you know, where I first started releasing stuff on a label because Maria brought me on to sort of try and revitalize Dust Tracks as like a digital label. So that's when I first started sort of setting up releases and getting that process going, I guess.
Right on.
And then through that, I guess it sort of got the attention of Nate Manic at Smart Bar. He was the talent buyer at the time. And I was like real about the Dust Track stuff, like the Paul Johnson sort of like heavy disco sample loop stuff. So Nate reached out to me and was like, hey, I'm trying to set up this weekly disco party called Dollar Disco and think like you'd be a great fit, blah, blah, blah. It'd be you, this guy, Kid Color, and this other guy, Michael Serafini, the owner of Gramophone. So I was like, oh my God, like, you know what I mean? This is so amazing. Like, what the hell is happening, you know? And then the party was like sort of a complete failure, but...
I remember like seeing promotions, but admittedly, I don't think I went out.
Yeah, and I guess like, I mean, through that, I became really close friends with Michael. And we sort of both always like gravitated towards like the house stuff and like really vibed with each other on the stuff that we were into, and the disco stuff was just like what we had to do on Sundays or whatever. And it just kind of like failed for a few years until like one of the guys moved away, and then Nate was basically like, okay, like, yeah, this isn't working. Do you guys want to like potentially try to rebrand and try something else, or just like call it quits? And then we're like, yeah, let's like do something house. Let's like try and whatever, get something together. So then Michael hit up like Bird Bardot and Louis Lazu, guys that were like, you know, sort of these really well-known Chicago hosts and party people, to sort of conceptualize what's now Queen. And then that just sort of, you know, took off and has been doing its own thing. It's been
amazing.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to be there yesterday. Depending on when this comes out, you won't know what yesterday is. But yesterday was Sunday. We're recording this on a Monday, and it's an amazing party. I mean,
for sure.
It's going so strong. It's so amazing. All right, so we've got all of that now. We can kind of fast forward a little bit. There's not everything we've got in there, but you are now kind of busy working on tons and tons of music. We're recording this in your recording studio right now. There's gear all around us. I wish I could give you a visual. But so you're working on a lot of music. You're releasing a lot of music. You have, you know, you just told us a story of like hearing about working with Michael for the first time and meeting people like Maria, but now you've like done music for like Shay Demir's label, and you've done music for so many of these folks who, even myself, like I consider to be some of my like musical heroes. But you're not working with these people, you're collaborating with them. Tell us about some of the stuff that's going on recently that you're really excited about or happy with or would want to share. And this could be records you've been working on, this could be gigs you had, just things that are going on now so people can get a sense for what's going on currently.
I'm real excited for this next release that I have coming out, because it's sort of, it's like this part 2 of Queen Tracks, which is like the first EP I ever did on vinyl. And it was sort of like the first one was songs that I made specifically for the party. And this one's like no different, but it felt like I always wanted to do a second part, but it just wasn't the right time. I didn't have the right vibe, and it's all kind of come together now, so I'm excited to sort of reapproach that idea and get these tracks out that I've been like really trying to make sure are just right.
I'm excited for that as well. I've heard a couple of them in progress, and they are freaking amazing. Is it going to be another 4-track EP?
Yeah.
Yeah, I cannot wait for that to come out. How about gigs? I know you were just in Europe for a while.
Yeah, I was just doing like a little European tour. I've been trying to do one just once a year, because I feel like otherwise it's a little overwhelming with like trying to finish the other projects and stuff I have going on. But it's always really nice to leave and share your music with people and come back feeling really re-energized and inspired to like finish all that stuff.
Yeah.
I think it's important, but
Yeah, it's good to get out there, kind of play, and also just hear other people dance and hang out and be in the atmosphere.
It's always funny too, because like I feel like DJing and having a relationship with music in Chicago is like much more of an intense thing, I guess, where like when you go play over there, they're like just so surprised because they like never heard, I don't know, they act like they've never heard music like this or something. But here it's like your friends are like, yeah, you played that last week, man.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, and so I feel like Chicago kind of gives you a special training, I guess.
Oh yeah. I agree 200%. I don't travel like I used to, but there's nothing more humbling than coming back home and playing like to your crowd, and they're kind of like, oh.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
Exactly.
What's up, man?
Yeah.
No, that's good. That's good. All right. So I don't want to take any more of your time. I know you're very, very busy. The way I like to end these, and we're going to go right into the mix after this, so the mix is going to kind of fade up behind your voice, but I like to leave the last word to the guest, to the artist, to the DJ. So this can be anything. People have said all sorts of things in the past, shout outs to their spouses and talking about fans and musicians and their music or whatever. So I'm going to leave it to you. It can be as short as long as you want, and then just imagine the music fading up behind your voice. So the last word is yours.
I guess I would just say this has been Garrett David, and thanks for letting me represent the House Nation.
Cool.